Welcome to the Sharon Fitzmaurice podcast, where we celebrate the resilience of the human spirit. My guest today is Aisleen Harte, a devoted mother, an experienced early years educator, and the owner of a preschool service on the outskirts of County Meath. With nearly 2 decades of experience, Aisleen is passionate about fostering children's growth and ensuring their voices are heard. My Voice, My Choice is her debut book, inspired by the belief in empowering children through understanding and communication. Her ultimate goal for My Voice, My Choice is to serve as a catalyst for change. If children's voices are heard and respected from a young age, we will empower them for a better future. And you also hope that adults can reflect on how our responses shape a child's confidence and emotional growth. What an introduction. You're very welcome, Aisleen.
Thank you so much, Sharon. Thanks for having me on.
Delighted to have you on. So, can you take us back a moment, Aisleen, and why you wanted to become an early years educator? Like, what was the spark for you in starting that career?
I always knew I wanted to work with children in some aspect. I thought initially it was primary school teaching. I was thinking a PE teacher. That was always kind of in the back of my mind. And then obviously academic expectation to get into that end can impact you. So I went down the role of early years and I done Montessori training. That was my training initially, and obviously you have to do your childcare training within that. And then yeah, I worked in another service for 6 years before opening my own, and then it took off from there. I just was really passionate about it and would have just always given it extra time and added little touches and stuff. And you just learn so much from the children. Um, and I changed so much over the years as well in the way I ran things, more inclusion and listening to the children more. And it's amazing what you see out of them when you do start listening. You see them really grow and explore more when their needs are being met and their interests are being met, rather than us doing loads of teacher-led stuff. That's not, they don't need that, they need to be heard. And yeah, the love of the children has just always been there.
Oh, that's lovely. And I suppose people have this image of, a lot of young children and trying to keep them quiet and get them to sit down. And one of the things I remember, Ashleen, with my second child in particular, who loved play and learning through play.
Yeah.
And when they went to primary school, after the second day of primary school, the sadness
Oh,
because we were just told to sit down every day and we were
yeah,
only allowed to have one golden hour in the week, and that
yeah.
golden hour was play. So every day it was looking over at all the things they wanted to play with, and they had
Oh,
to wait for a whole week. And I just saw the sadness.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, it is. That's so hard. That's actually heartbreaking to hear that. Yeah, yeah. And there is so much. That's what I was saying. I changed so much in terms of asking the children what they wanted to do, and changing the rooms to be primarily play-based. Even with the Montessori equipment, initially it used to be me teaching the children or my colleagues teaching the children the correct way to use it. And in hindsight, it was like this, the way they were using it was way more beneficial for their learning and exploration than we could have ever taught them. And when you start giving them choices, my God, do you see totally different children? You really do, and listening to them. So yeah, it is, that transition is very, very hard. And for many years, as I started to change and give choices around things in preschool, I did have parents come to me and say, but like, is that the right thing to do? Because how are they going to transition into primary school and how are they going to sit and do what the teacher tells them? And I said, but that's a different role. Our role is not to do that to them. So we're giving them a different experience. So in hindsight, I was starting to use my voice in support of these children as well and say, our experience is these precious years and they'll never get them again. So giving them all that choice is so important. So I was more confident in speaking up and saying that, you know.
Yeah. Because that's kind of one of the questions. It's like, how did you support, or how do you support children in preschool expressing their feelings and, being able to set boundaries for themselves?
Mm,
So it is in the listening to the children and the observing, isn't it? Because
yeah, oh, definitely.
yeah, I had a guest on last week's podcast, and it was about how she didn't learn,
Yeah.
in school the same way as, or I suppose the expectation of how we're supposed to learn, and
Mm,
that she had to find a different route, through
yeah.
learning in the way that she had dyslexia. So again, the school system, as they move out of, the early years and moving into the system of education,
Yeah.
it's kind of one size fits all for many, but
Yeah.
we're not that, because we're all individuals,
All
as you know,
individuals,
from young
exactly.
children.
Yeah, yeah. And it's so simple. This always stuck in my head in terms of listening to them. And I touch on it in my book about a choice. But I remember one of my colleagues one time, it's a long time ago, but she was handing out paintbrushes and they were all different colored tops on them. And, she was handing them out. And one little boy said, I want a blue one. And she was like, oh, but we don't have a blue one. And like she said it to me herself, she said, I regret this so much. And he said, but that's what I want. And she said, oh, but the color doesn't matter. And he turned around and he said, but it matters to me, and
Mm.
that stuck with me definitely as I was writing my book. That one little comment where we would have just dismissed his feelings and said, but sure, really, does it matter what color you get? But as he said, it mattered to him. And I
Mm.
think little things like that we can dismiss very easily, where we wouldn't choose specific things that we didn't want, So it's unfair for us to expect the children, and that's something so basic, in
Yeah.
in terms of their voice being heard.
So again, we come back to that, how that affects children from an early age when their needs are not met, or when they don't feel like they're being listened to, or that they're, I suppose, how they're looking at who they are in the world,
Yeah.
how it affects them moving forward. What have you noticed about that, Aisleen?
Well, yeah, we definitely, I think the earlier the better, because as you said, when you do go into the, education system and it is kind of a case of children are a little bit afraid to speak up and it could be something so basic. So I think the tools in the early years or the earlier the better, even from as they're babies, you have to empower them to use their voice and let them know that it's okay. Within the preschool, we would have always started in the last number of years to say to the children, if somebody was bothering them or somebody was pulling their toy off them or putting their hands on them, whether they were pulling at them, all these things happen in preschool. That's just the way it is, and they're all learning and developing. But we would say to the children, but just put your hand out and say, stop, I don't want you to do that. And we would say, use your big, strong voice,
Mhm.
and it's okay. And we actually found once we gave the go ahead for that, they were like, oh, okay. So we are supported by the adult. And you'd often hear them then, these little 3 and 4 year olds then saying, stop, I don't want you to do that. And you'd be just so proud in that moment because that's just the tool they needed. Whatever was going on for them, they weren't comfortable with it. And we were helping them use that. So I think if we can start it as early as possible within the homes in early years, that when they do go into the primary education, that they can speak up and not be scared to, because it just could be something so basic. But if they're not able to speak up about their basic needs, like, that's it's
Mm.
worrying.
Yeah. And it really does start, I suppose, building confidence within young children, as well, as you said, that their voice is heard, and that an adult, whether it be in the early years education or at home,
Yeah,
that it's valued,
yeah,
and it is. It's kind of like, even though you may not agree with them or understand why
yeah,
they want it like that, but that their feelings are valid, and being
yeah,
seen as who they are is really important. And I suppose that's kind of a building block for them to say, in years to come, I can express myself,
yeah,
say who I am, what I like, what my
yeah,
feelings are, and that even if you don't agree with it, you'll listen.
yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah, it is. It's so important. And I even feel like since I've done the book and I'm going, to schools and different things, I was at a baby yoga massage class this morning where the facilitator invited me in to speak to parents about my book. And I actually think, my voice was never shut down when I was younger, but I still hadn't the courage to use it. Um,
Mm.
and that was just, I suppose, the way it was. A lot of the times children were seen and not heard. And I would have been just afraid to speak out of turn. And I was always a good girl and I was classified as a good girl. So I remained like that even into my teens and 20s. And as I became an adult, I realized those situations that I just hadn't the confidence to speak up about simple little things. And I thought, God, we really need to make this change. We were chatting this morning about becoming new mothers and, being with doctors or being in labor wards and knowing your own body and your gut. And you just haven't the confidence to speak up when you just know. So I think it goes right the way through. Like there's a huge message around the book that I think is valid for everybody, children, adults, grandparents, us all. So I've realized that, yeah, my own voice is, I'm only starting to use my own voice now. So
Yeah.
and the hope is then that I can encourage children to use it as well and just given the tools and that adults can, that the book will spark a little thought thinking, God, I didn't really consider the children in that when I was saying, no, you can't have this or you can't do that.
Mm. Yeah, and even I think with the adults reading along with the children, it's going to help maybe inspire them because just as
Yeah,
you said, a lot of adults or parents reading it back or guardians will realize that, God, I didn't have that belief in myself,
yeah,
and they
yeah,
may reflect back on a time like you have and where they were told no, or you can't,
mm,
or you're not good enough
yeah,
stuck with them throughout their adulthood and how it made them feel. So, of
yeah,
course, we never want a child to feel like that. But sometimes, as parents, we always say that we do our best, but it's
mm.
unintentional sometimes. And it's sometimes
Oh
the
God,
awareness, isn't it, of it,
it
which
is.
underlies.
Yeah, and I've said that since the time I launched this book. I do not want anyone to feel, judged or shamed. It's to bring awareness. And because my own kids will tell me I'm far from perfect.
Yeah.
I'm learning all the time. And, my own book has actually caught me on the hop a few times where my children have come back at me
Yeah.
with, Mommy, don't forget it's my voice, my choice. And I'm like, oh God, I've nearly hung myself here in terms of what I'm trying to promote. But yeah, it's definitely just about awareness, and I think because it's a clear, simple message, just to say, well, if you're doing this, why is it okay for you to expect me to do something else? And it really, somebody did say to me that bought it, they said it was the most thought-provoking book as a parent that they had read, and that was for me, that was amazing to hear that. I thought, God, that's huge for me. So if I could do that with in loads of different scenarios in families and children, and that would be amazing.
Mm. So maybe the adults are going to learn more about
Yeah,
themselves through your
yeah,
book.
yeah, yeah,
I love that. So you were writing poetry before you wrote this book. So
yeah,
kind of how did it go from poetry into, because I know there's rhyme, isn't there, and rhythm in the book as
yes,
well.
yeah,
So it kind of
yeah,
blended in, I suppose. But was
yeah.
poetry for you something that you always, did, or was it a way of expressing yourself, or was it, where did it come from?
So I only started writing poetry during COVID. It was just a hobby that came out of nowhere. I suppose thinking back, it was just I had a clear head and had a clearer mind and I was thinking more and yeah, I started to write for family and friends during COVID. And then as we came out of COVID, I'd write them for a special occasion for someone in the family or a friend. And, that's where that all came about. And then actually, COVID probably brought me to even thinking about the book. One of the lines in it, one of the pages is, "Do you hug and kiss others when it doesn't feel right? I didn't think so. I shouldn't have to fight. Yes, I'm young, but human like you. My voice, my choice, and my body too." And I think that's probably the most significant two pages in the book. But as I was writing poetry, and then the book just the words just came because I had different scenarios where I was really attuned to what was going on. And I thought, God, if I'm realizing that it's my discomfort, if I have two daughters, they're 6 and 8, they have amazing voices, they challenge me all the time. But I started to realize it was my discomfort with them speaking up. And I thought, it's the adult not really taking what they're saying seriously. So I found after COVID, obviously we were told for so long and telling our children, you can't hug and kiss anybody, you can't go near them. And when we came out of it, my eldest really struggled, really, to going back into the world and being left with people that she hadn't seen or, had no connection or touch or anything with. And I remember thinking, I haven't even got the voice to speak up and say she doesn't want to do that, and nobody meant any harm. They just wanted their love and affection back, But that was probably a big inspiration for that page, especially for me, because I realized I am struggling to speak up for her. So how many other children are out there being expected or forced into hugging and kissing and, family members or, neighbor, whoever. I think we've all experienced situations where you're just like, oh, Jesus, I don't want to do that. And you just felt you had to, it was
Mm.
expected. But as adults, we wouldn't just hug and kiss somebody we weren't comfortable with. So to expect our children is just, it's crazy, So that whole poetry aspect during COVID brought a really thought-provoking situation for me. And then the rest just kind of all fell into place. I thought of other scenarios where we were expecting our children to do something different than what we would expect for ourselves. So and as one of the other pages of the book was a cup or a mug, don't you have favorites? Drinks can taste different. I've heard you say it. So when I ask for a certain one, it's not to cause rift or be awkward for fun. And that's something so simple where we're giving them a green plate and they're like, no, I want the yellow one. And you're like, will you just take the green plate? And, it's really just us not listening. They just didn't want the other color. So I think in a world where there's so much advice and support for parents out there, it can get a bit overwhelming because I found myself, as a parent, I was constantly researching and looking up things. As I said, my children are so strong-willed and use their voice. And I was probably a bit like, God, I don't know how to manage this. I was uncomfortable with it. So as I started to research, you can get very overwhelmed. So I think with my book, it's a little stepping stone to start listening and start, giving the children control of their own voice and their own choices. And yeah, it's a little bit of awareness and it can just be a start. It can be a start in a world where there is a lot of information out there. So yeah, literally the poetry led to this, and then I hemmed and hawed about what to do with it, and I thought, God, well, I won't I? And I did. I went with it, and I'm so happy I did because the feedback even I'm getting is really good, and I feel like I'm only scratching the surface now. I really want to get the message out there.
Yeah, I think it's so important. And everything that you've said, I think back to my own kids when they were young and parenting, and even when we were younger. And you're so right, it's like go and kiss that person or hug them now, say goodbye, give them a kiss, and you just
Mm,
did not want to.
yeah,
But you were, as you said years ago, it was like put up and shut up kind of thing.
yeah, yeah,
Whereas now, I know with my kids, even, you might say goodbye now or when they were younger. But if they didn't want to, and I have a niece in particular, and she'd say no straight away, and that was it. There
yeah.
was no plum-off and there was no
Wasn't that
pushing her into
brilliant?
it.
Yeah,
Yeah. And it's like adults, it's nearly like just as you said there, you couldn't find your voice for your
mm,
daughter. So that comes back to parents' own insecurities, isn't it?
yeah.
And parents wanting to be the perfect parent or not
Oh,
to
a
offend
hundred
anybody else.
percent. Yeah, 100%. And I think because of my role as well in early years, I was like, oh my God, this, like, I should have all the answers here. My child is just, oh, Jesus. And it came to having this persona of what I should be.
Mm.
And it was my discomfort again that I was almost putting on her, and yeah, you're thinking, God, will you just do what I'm asking you to do, please? Keep up the front. And, she challenged me out of that. And I'm so proud that she did. I have learned so much from becoming a parent. I obviously my career was a massive help too, but I think becoming a parent is a whole different ballgame. It really is, because no matter what you can advise others, when it comes to your own, you're learning all of the time. And I'm so glad that my children have took me out of my comfort zone, because
Mm.
if they just done everything I asked them to do and made my life, so easy and, smooth sailing, like that's not reality. And I'm delighted now that they have encouraged me to go ahead and support other children with my book.
Yeah, I think it's brilliant because, again, like that, we want our children to be individuals and we want them to be unique in their personalities and who they are going out into the
Yeah,
world. But if we, as parents, and I'm including myself in this, we as parents want them to look like Billy and Joe down the road and be as good at them at sports and school and music
yeah,
and everything else, we're just putting them into a category of, you
yeah.
have to be like everybody else, or this thing. Why aren't you as good as such and such in
I
school?
know, I know.
And then making them feel less than. So for me, and I can see exactly where you're coming from, it again, it's that persona as a parent, and you want to be seen as the good parent because if the child isn't doing good in school, you feel it's a reflection on
Yeah,
you.
on you. Yeah, it is. Yeah, that's it. The pressure you feel. And it's awful because we're all learning as parents all of the time, Um, and it is okay for us to be uncomfortable with how they are, But I actually was in somebody's company last week and my children were with me, and she said, they're such free spirits. And I'm like, they're bouncing off the walls, but and I just thought, but she could see, she was like, the free spirit is just fantastic to see. You can see that they're happy to just be that child bouncing off the wall, and that I have to be okay with that. It's again, you have to think of it's your own discomfort. They're actually not doing anything wrong, you know. So,
Yeah, so
yeah.
right. And I think just as you said, as parents, our children are always going to be our greatest teachers in life because
Oh God.
another thing you said, which is really important, is there is so much information out there, and you can get every book when you're pregnant about parenting and the new baby. And of course, your new
Mm,
baby is not like the babies in the book. It may not
yeah,
sleep, it may not take the feed, you're
yeah,
exhausted, you don't look like the mothers on Instagram that are toned
yeah,
up and perfect and you're dragging yourself around in your
yeah,
pajamas with baby vomit down your back, and you're
yeah,
thinking, what's wrong with me?
yeah. It can be hard.
Very hard. So again, with the information out there, I always say it's like guidelines, isn't it? But
Yeah.
you have to learn how to be a parent through your
Oh,
child and through
yeah,
each individual child. I've two that are so different. And
yeah.
you have that child and the next child may be completely different in loads of different ways, even
Mm,
from sleeping to not sleeping, all of that. And you're learning how to cope and I suppose readjust your life as your children
yeah,
grow. But when they start coming into their own little person
yeah.
with their words and how they express themselves and the no's and the yeses and all of those things, you're learning also about yourself, which I think that's
Oh,
why this is
massive.
really an invaluable book, even for parents reading
Yeah,
this,
yeah,
that they're realizing, just as you said, which is really important, is why do I feel so much discomfort
yeah,
around this?
yeah, exactly.
Isn't it?
Yeah, yeah. I spoke to a girl this morning actually who said to me what she even found in her own house with the book was it brought up conversation between her and her partner. And she said, the way you don't want to be nitpicking or you don't want to be a nag or you don't want to, you'd be trying to, almost explain things without offending. And she said it actually was a great opportunity for discussion with them that where they didn't feel, offensive and or defensive, and they weren't thinking that she was picking on them as such, because we're all, especially the dads can sometimes think that we have it all figured out and then they don't need to be told anything and it's grand. And she found that when they actually read through it together, she was able to say, so do you see what I'm saying about, the scenario about getting them to hug and kiss people? we would not do it ourselves. So that was good to hear. That's a whole other side of where the book has been helpful as well within the family, not just with the children, but with the partners, you know.
Mm. Yeah, there's so much in it, isn't it? I mean,
Yeah.
I'd love to go through it page by page.
Yeah, honestly,
Do you
yeah,
know what I
yeah,
mean? Just to even break it down, because there is so much. And I think as people come back to you, after purchasing and reading the book for themselves and with their children, they're probably going to give you more insights into it, which, as you said, is going to lead you on, maybe, as you said, because you're only scratching the surface
yeah,
of
yeah,
what this book, what this discussion really, isn't it? This
yeah,
narrative is going to be in years to
yeah,
come, and how we look at listening, our own listening skills, not just to our children, but to ourselves in that discomfort around what we allowed, what we put up with, and those expectations of our children now, isn't it?
yeah. Oh, it definitely is. Yeah, it really is, you know. So, well, that's like I do hope that anyone who does get it, you know, can keep going back to it. You know, I do think it's a resource that you could just keep going back over and, you know, bedtime discussions about maybe something that happened that day that might, you know,
Mm.
resonate from the book. And I have the two little work pages at the end of it where the children can fill in where they'd like their voice to be heard, or you know, if it's a younger child that they can tell the parents and the parents can fill it in. You know, I think it's a resource that can be reused over and over.
Yeah, absolutely. And why do you feel this message is so needed now, Aisleen?
I actually think as only as I'm learning more myself about the world and life and adults, you know, even adults who are going through so much, and life is just such a race now. You know, families are so busy. I think there's a lot of pressure on parents and families, and I just think the book and the message is it's so important, and the earlier that we can start it, the better, for better chances for our children. You know, that
Mm.
as they grow, as they go into the next step of different education systems, even jobs, relationships, I just think it could bring about huge change. One little thing could just spark something in your mind and think, oh my God, I really, really wasn't considering their voice there. I was in a secondary school that I used to go to a few weeks ago, and I spoke to students in there. And I actually just said to them, I said, you know, a lot of you guys at this age now would be in relationships or starting relationships. And the power of your voice in relationships is so important, you know, in terms of what you're comfortable with, what you want from a person, you know. I just think it's really important that we're giving them that chance because the world is a very scary place at the moment, and so much going on. And, you know, we have to empower our children because they are the future. So I really think it's massively important that we start within our homes and giving them that courage and confidence to speak up as they leave the home. And that's the last two pages of the book. I don't want to give it all away, but I have had a few parents say to me they were in tears at the end of it because it's kind of like a punchline where they're like, oh God, you know,
Mm.
it is about when they leave you in the future that you've given them their voice and choice, and they can take it into the world, you know.
Yeah, I often say that because my kids are adults and grown up.
Yeah,
It is extremely hard, of course, for any parents that have had their children leave because we spend so much time, we put so much energy into them,
yeah,
and then they grow up to be adults and they fly the nest, and I'd say,
yeah,
well, we've given them wings and now it's time for them to
yeah,
fly. And that's part of our role as a parent. As my mother said, they're only being lent to us for a short time. We're the
yeah,
guardians of them walking on the earth, and they're not
yeah,
ours, they don't belong to us, but we are
yeah,
like their guides, their teachers, and then they have teachers in school, but I think
yeah,
parents are the first teachers, aren't they, really, of.
yeah.
And again, as I said, for all parents, we're all just learning, we've all
Mm,
made mistakes, we're not perfect, and I think it's to be okay about that.
yeah.
The more you talk about my voice, my choice, the more I think, just as you said, how it is so invaluable at this time. And
Mm,
even if like I have adult children, it's even now to be able to listen to their voices, their choices, and what's
Yeah,
important to them, even if it's not the same as ours,
yeah,
that the young people all over the world are standing up and using their voices now
yeah.
to, protest against injustices all over the world. And you're like, these young people are amazing,
Yeah, honestly, yeah, they really are. Yeah,
you
they've
know?
definitely, there is a lot, I definitely think there's a lot more confidence in speaking up than when I was younger.
Yeah.
And like that, we just need to encourage it. And I do, I'm conscious of saying that, yeah, we want to do it in a respectful manner. You can definitely do it all with kindness and respect, but
Mm.
it's so important to, if you have something on your mind and your stomach and your gut is telling you to say it, because yeah, it's there for a reason. And yeah, our voices are so important in the world today. They really are.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think those conversations, I'm just trying to imagine years ago, because like that, reading through books with my kids. And I think books are a beautiful way for parents to sit together with their young children, and especially when there's colors in it and rhyme, it's beautiful because I
Yeah,
see my grandniece, and she's not 3 yet, but she learned so much by repetition and through rhymes and through
yeah.
colors and pictures and everything. And she knows her times tables and she knows everything. And
Ah,
I'm just amazed. Like, her voice is powerful because
yeah, brilliant.
her mum, and even as aunties, young aunties, and her grandmother being young as well, everybody is just listening to her,
Encourage. Yeah,
encouraging
brilliant.
her. Whereas
Yeah,
I say sometimes it's easier to give somebody else's child a voice because you're not the scattered parent with 20 million
yeah,
things to do,
yeah,
and you
yeah,
can see the value in it. So I think it's not to berate ourselves as parents, but to say we did the best we could. But
yeah,
for up and coming new parents, that maybe it is something that they could say, this can actually could be really valuable to me
yeah,
as well
yeah,
as my child, so that I am giving them the confidence and empowering their voice as they
yeah,
move forward. When they're stepping away from me and to go into school and out into the wider world, you've given them another tool to
yeah.
strengthen their confidence and belief in themselves, which is very powerful, isn't it?
Yeah, oh God, it is. It's so important. And even at the baby yoga this morning, that's what I was saying. I said, from their babies, you're watching their cues, you're listening to their little babbles and their sounds, and that's how they communicate with you. And
Yeah.
then, they get their first words and they're starting to talk, and we all live for that and love it. And then suddenly when they start speaking up, or the term answering back, which is used all the time, then all of a sudden we're like, oh God, this is not okay, or I'm uncomfortable with it. So it's important that when we do encourage that, the speech and the sounds from the very new baby, that as it starts to come into words and sentences and them talking up, that we continue to encourage it, and don't try and stop it then, and say that don't do this and don't do that, but
Mm.
now, as I said, I'm no perfect parent, I'm still, there's still days where I have to nearly look back at my book myself, but it's just to be aware. And like, isn't it amazing to think what we can give to our children by giving them their voice and letting them be heard? Or, sometimes
Mm.
I think as well, the term being used are like, are you going to let them speak to you like that? Is God, that's God, I wouldn't have done that in my day. And it's like, but they're actually just speaking. That, a lot of the time it is just conversing or giving their opinion, and it just it's just us that's not okay with it. It's us, our discomfort. So yeah, so I think, yeah, there's loads of scope around the book that can be to be discussed and brought up in situations that arise.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think it's amazing. So, talking about, your daughters, they contributed as well to the illustrations
They did,
of the
yeah.
book as well. That's so special, isn't it? So, in years to
Oh,
come, they're going to say, I was part of that book in so many ways as well.
yeah, exactly. The two girls drew the two little people at the front of it that's surrounded by the love heart. And then my 6-year-old, she was 5 at the time, she drew the house at the back. So we're in the middle of building and we'll be moving soon, please God. So that was our new house. And I love that even the picture was just so free spirited. She has her sister upside down doing a cartwheel and she's her dog in it. And I just thought it was so funny, but so special to have my own children's drawings in it, that they're part of it. And you'd often, actually, I heard my 6-year-old telling a friend of hers recently, when I was going to my old secondary school, she was saying, guess where mommy's going with her book today? And her friend was trying to guess, and she was like, no, like a much bigger place than that. And this conversation went on. And I remember thinking, oh my God, she was so proud, nearly saying where mommy was going with her book and to talk to students. And I know they don't really understand what it feels like, I suppose, to be an author at the moment. I still nearly don't believe it myself, but I do, as you said, in years to come when they see their pictures in the book and my book is in my local library, and things like that are very special. And hopefully I can continue to make them proud, and they'll go on to continue using their voice. So I don't think that's an issue though.
No, and I think it's wonderful. And it is so lovely because, again, even if you were not as confident in your voice, but the fact that you had the courage and the bravery, especially from your
Yeah,
experience, to say, from writing these poems during COVID and then, allowing that to be elaborated in this book.
yeah,
And even if I'm nervous about it, I'm going to send it out there because it's something that you have experience with as an early years educator, but also as a parent.
yeah.
I'm not saying that you know it all because that's what I love is your honesty and say, I'm still, I still have to
Oh
refer back
God.
to my own book
Yeah.
and to put it out there and to see how this could open the conversation up. So it's not just the voices of the children, it's the voices of the adults, it's the
Yeah.
voices of the different groups and schools,
Yes.
and wherever you go to, there's a conversation around it.
Yeah.
So, in fact, what it's doing, it's opening up everyone's voice.
Yeah, it really is. Yeah. And I'm learning that as I go, even, where it has been purchased. I had a group of books purchased from like a domestic violence group. And I was like, oh my God, I never even considered that being a possibility. But it is for everybody. It actually is for everybody. As you
Mm.
said, it's not just the children, it's the adults, it's all the various groups that, can spark a conversation around it.
Absolutely. I mean, I think it's so important because even though there's so much awareness out there and we are told, we tell our children about, their private space and boundaries and all of that, and they have an understanding of it somewhat, when it
Mm.
comes to their friends and everything. But even as you said, around families or neighbors or strangers, that it's still expected to shake hands or hug or kiss them goodbye. Whereas we should allow for our children to decide or choose if they wish to do that or not. Because
Yeah.
again, obviously, I am a survivor of childhood sexual abuse. So
Okay.
there was no expression of my voice. So again, even with the awareness, and I've spoken about this at different groups myself, that
Okay.
it's still happening in the world.
Oh yeah.
There's children still being abused, and with all the
Yeah.
awareness and education we have, the one thing they can't do is express it.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so scary,
Yeah.
and that's and I'm sorry, so sorry to hear that you went through that. I wasn't aware. And I think that part in my book, it isn't just as simple as, I don't want to hug and kiss somebody. It's what could unfold, in a much deeper manner.
Yes.
So by us teaching them that you say no if a hug is not appropriate, we're giving them the tools to say no and speak up when there's way worse possibilities of
Yeah.
other types of abuse happening. It's massive. So that little line, that's what I say, like that part is to help people and hopefully prevent other stuff happening down the line. And if God forbid something has happened, that you can speak up and explain what happened, because so many voices, unfortunately, so many people have come and gone and not being able to express it. And that's just heartbreaking for people to have had to live through that, you know. So yeah, so I think it's just so, so important. It really is.
Yeah, and that's one of the things I loved about it, my voice, my choice. And it is about us now as adults and, the new parents coming up to really listen to their children's voices and for teachers to
Yeah,
listen to children's voices. Because if it is going on within the home or there is something going on within the home and the child doesn't have a voice, that their voice is listened to in
yeah,
school by an appropriate adult that is there that sees them
yeah,
every day, and it's not just disregarded.
yeah,
They are that voice, that little voice. It might be in a whisper, it mightn't
yeah,
be able to have the emotional intelligence to express how they feel, but it might be just I'm scared or I'm
yeah,
frightened, and
yeah,
for that adult to say, oh,
hmm, yeah,
and to notice it and to say I hear you could make
yeah,
a
yeah.
huge difference in that child's life.
Oh, it really could, yeah. And just to have somebody safe, you know, just
Yeah.
one safe person to go to, you know, yeah, it really is important. And I've gone into schools, you know, just reading it kind of, I was just to get the message out there initially. And you do want to go into schools that are really encouraging it. So, and I think there's a fine line still, you know, around different schools and how they're led and that. So, I've been really working on trying to get into the schools. I've been told, and I believe it myself, it would be a great book to have part of a curriculum. It would be, you know, in terms of SPHE, it meets all the curriculum criteria for that. But the Department of Education don't take on individual products. So I have to literally go to schools myself and talk to principals and teachers and then see what way they take it in as a resource, but I just think it would be a brilliant resource to have in schools, not just to sit on a library, but to be
Mm.
actively using it as part of curriculum activities. And so there's a lot I still want to do with it. There's a lot of research, a lot of homework I want to get done myself, but I do hope to continue to go into schools, but to actually create more of a concrete workshop almost around it where the kids are getting hands on, where we're doing, even if it's art activities around using your voice, like, little worksheets and stuff where they can just jot in speech bubbles what's important to them. And
Mm.
so, yeah, I do really want to push that and get that message through that way, So I hope that I can as much as possible.
I'd say you can. I think you found your voice and you have an
Yeah,
important message to share now, Aisleen. And as a mother
yeah,
and an educator, you can see the importance of this, and even just
yeah,
now, the conversations you're having. So
yeah,
you're always going to come up against resistance, within
yeah.
systems.
That's
And
yeah,
like you say, they're just one avenue. There is many avenues actually that you can go to, and
yeah.
you never know where it's going to take you. And I think to completely celebrate the fact that you have this beautiful book out in the world and
Oh,
that
thank you.
it is creating conversations and open up a dialogue about, okay, what does this mean for me? What does this
Yeah,
mean for society? And
yeah.
again, even after your 20 years of childhood education, what have you seen society's views, towards children and their emotional needs? I'm sure it must have
Mm.
changed in over 20 years.
Oh God, it has. And even as I said, the way I would have approached,
Yeah.
my teaching approach has massively changed. And I'm happy to say that in the early days, I had literally preschool rooms that were like junior infants classrooms. And is that something I'm proud of now? Not really, because they were really just doing what I was providing and asking them to do. It was lovely and it meant lovely days for me or my colleagues. But it's amazing as the years have unfolded. Simple things like if a child came in and didn't want to take off their coat, I was like, absolutely, leave it on. And that coat for them was their comfort blanket.
Mm.
And it's so lovely to see, like as the weeks were going on, then I remember for this particular child, suddenly the zip would come down a little bit, and then it might come down another bit, and then suddenly the whole zip was open, and then maybe a week later the coat was off.
Yeah.
And that was, watching that unfold was a child starting to feel comfortable in the environment, but if I turned around and said, oh no, the coats all have to be taken off and hung up and we only wear our coats outside, imagine what that would have brought around for that child. So
Mm.
like it's the simplest of things. And even allowing them to have their lunch, I've noticed in the early weeks of the settling in, they're just mad for their lunch. And again, I think it's comfort.
Mhm.
They're doing something to keep their little mind busy, and like it's so hard. They're only babies coming away from their parents, and we have to just be there to take care of them in those initial weeks until they start to build confidence, and letting them go and to have a bit of their lunch whenever they want. They might only be in the door 5 minutes and they'd want
Yeah.
something, but it's around comfort for them, and
Mm.
then slowly but surely the time would move on, and then you'd have a lunchtime where they'd all sit down together, or sometimes we do roll in lunch, and it works in some classes and others it doesn't. But little things like that, like what harm is it if they want to leave their coat on for the couple of hours? That's what they're comfortable doing. I've often come home from work and the coat is on me in the winter months, and I can't take it off because I'm too cold. And so they're simple things that we all do without anybody questioning us. And these little people, like it's so important that if they say, no, I don't want to take it off, or we've had kids wearing gloves in the classroom, and I just think it's brilliant. It's watching them express themselves. But as I said to you, the important part is that we're listening. We're not telling them, no, you need to do the opposite. So I have massively changed over the years in terms of listening to them, being more child led, and creating things around their interests. And then you see happier children for it. You can see it. Um, so yeah, I think there's a long way to go in terms of education in Ireland in allowing that. And it can happen. It's just you need people to be open to it. And I think
Mm.
we'd see a lot happier children if they knew their voice was really, really heard.
Yeah. And as you said, it starts with meeting their emotional needs
Yeah,
and understanding that our own emotional needs as adults, sometimes, that we need to listen to what we need. But if it frustrates us because the child is not giving us what we need,
yeah.
then the issue is not with the child, the issue is with
No,
ourselves,
it's with
isn't it?
ourselves. Yeah,
Yeah, it's
yeah,
the discomfort that they kind of bring up within us, and that it is an opportunity for us to learn and grow as well as adults and as parents or
yeah,
educators as well. And
yeah.
you were working with Emu Inc. Publishing as well to bring your vision to life. How was that?
Oh, brilliant. Emer is just incredible. So I actually know Emer, her sister works with me. So that's how I knew her. I knew her for years, but we hadn't ever chatted one on one. We'd be seeing each other in passing. And Emer done an interview with me for a football club that I used to play with. She was just doing a lot of work around clubs at the time. And I had the words of my book written. And I had looked into self-publishing, and it was just now a minefield. I just didn't have a clue. I really didn't. It was all so new. And at the time of the interview that Emer done with me, I thought, okay, here's my chance. I'll
Yeah.
bring my I'll bring my notes with me, and I'll just mention it to her. So we had a brief conversation at the time, and she said, God, I'll absolutely chat to you about it and see what you want to do. And so we met up a few months later because I kind of hit a nervous patch again where I said, oh God, no, I don't think I'm ready to do this. So we waited and we met a few months later, and she read it, and she really believed in the words of the book. And honestly, without Emer doing that, I wouldn't have my book today, because I really didn't know what way to, like, it's very, there's so much information out there about self-publishing, and I suppose you have to get the right people behind you, and you've a lot to look into to get your product out there successfully. So Emer just said to me, I was still unsure. It was what was holding me back was my own confidence and my own voice. When I think about it now, I was very scared about putting myself out there. Um, and Emer just said to me, Aisleen, I think you have such a message in the book. She said, I would be afraid if somebody creates something similar, you're really going to regret it.
Mm.
And I thought, okay, I'll do it. Okay, I'm going. And she believed in the words, and it was just, she was amazing, amazing. She done all the work really. Apart from the finishing touches, we were over and back, but she was incredible. Yeah, she reached out to the illustrator. We had a couple of illustrators that we were trying to narrow down, and I really wanted the illustrations to be simple. I think because the book is a simple, clear message, I didn't want fussy illustrations, and I think they are. That Aneemer helped, with the pages and what she recommended to be on each page in terms of matching the words and the message. And I just think she nailed it. I really do. So the experience with Emu Ink was brilliant from start to
Oh,
finish.
that's brilliant. And you're so right. I think we all need support, especially when it is a first book going out and
Yeah,
somebody to have eyes, separate to your own to read over to see can they feel the message? Not
yeah,
just read it, but can they feel the message and can they envision what this would look like as a finished book or product, as you said?
yeah,
So, yeah, it is really important. And I think sometimes we have to remember we can't do everything on our own. We do need support to get our
yeah,
message out there and to get it out the way we would like others to receive it. And I think
yeah,
the way you're speaking about it now and that support has got you again to share your voice and to share your message, where you're now going to empower so many other people to be able to use their voice to say
yeah.
what is important to them. So I always say there's a ripple effect, isn't there, really,
Oh, the
Aisleen, for all of us when we follow that purpose and
yeah.
that passion that burns inside of us and say, what is it I really want to say now?
Yeah, well, that's it. And I think because she believed in me and my words for the book, that's all I needed. And and that's exactly what we want for our children. Somebody to just believe in them, listen to them, and that's exactly what Emer from Emu Inc. Did for me. And I feel like I'm a whole new person.
Uh,
It's amazing what a year can do. And I have done a lot of work on myself as well to build up this confidence to do it. But every little step I take and every conversation I have around the book, it's given me more and more confidence. And I know even after speaking to you today, I'll have got a lot more belief in myself to share the message and the importance of sharing it. So yeah, it's lovely when you have support around you. And thankfully I've never been shy of asking for it, because I don't have it all figured out. And, regardless of my experience working with children, everyone else's opinion is still important, and there's always learning. And, there's things I do hope to have more books. I would love to create a Voice of the Child series. That's my goal. Whenever it'll happen, I don't know, but around different titles such as separation or
mm,
death. Because again, we have to listen to the child's voice in these situations because they're human the same as us. So yeah, as I move forward, I'll be looking for more advice and support, and you can't do it without it. You need people that understand and know. So yeah, so with Emer and Emu Inc., hopefully there'll be lots more to come.
oh, that is brilliant, Aisleen. It was so lovely chatting to you today, Aisleen. I'm just so excited for you going out there, sharing your message
Oh,
with
thank
the
you.
world and with your wonderful book. So you can find the book on buythebook.ie. It's
Yeah,
also available in A&M Newsagents in Kells in County Meath, Hogan's Farm Shop in Courtown, Kells, County Meath, and you can borrow it at the local library in Kells, County Meath. Um, and again, I would say let that book go out to a wider audience as
yeah,
much as
yeah.
possible. Have you sent it into radio stations and television programs or anything like that?
Yeah, I've done a good few emails to different stations. I've another podcast I've two lined up in September because I know a lot of podcasts are finishing up now, and I need to get on to my local radio station. I sent out lots of emails initially when I launched the book back in December, and now I need to start following them up because I know myself how busy everyone is. December is crazy and things get missed.
Yeah.
So I'm now, with my book diary and my normal life diary. So I'll start to fill all that and reach out to people again. But I think you're right. Like it's the message that goes out there to all the different groups, and
Yeah.
the more I can share it, the more I hope it comes into homes and classes and workshops or whatever it is. So I have to continue to reach out. And what I just say is the worst case scenario is I don't get a reply or somebody says no. And that's life, that's part of it. But if I don't keep knocking, I'll never
Yeah.
know.
And again, when it is you sharing your message, you know, the reasoning behind it, the purpose of it, what you want this book to enable children to feel
Yeah,
empowered in their voice, it's your voice that is
yeah,
powering the message of your book, My
yeah, that's
Voice,
so
My
true.
Choice. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that is Aisleen Harte, and you can find her on A_R_words on Instagram, or you can email Aisleen on arwords24@gmail.com if you would like to contact her and have her on your show or on your program or on your newspaper. So again, I would say keep sharing the message, Aisleen. It
Thank
just
you.
sounds amazing, and I think it's something that's vitally important in our society today, but more so going forward for our future generation, that
Yeah.
as they grow and that they are allowed to express who they are,
Mm.
you know,
Yeah.
what their identity means to them, and that as adults and older generations growing up, that we start to value our children's voices more and more, that we have to learn it's not the same as it was. Things
No.
are changing, and sometimes we all know people don't like change, but this is our future generation. This is our promise for the
Yeah.
future, our younger generation. And if they go out thinking, I have been listened, my voice is valuable, my opinions matter, and I can do anything I want to do in the world because I've
Yeah.
been told that I matter and my voice matters.
Yeah.
That is
Yeah.
just amazing, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah, it is. It's so important. It really is. And thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to talk to you today. It was lovely. Such an enjoyable chat.
Oh, I loved it too. Thank you so much, Ashley. So, as I said, please check out Ashley's book on buythebook.ie, and you can find her on Instagram at A_R_words. And the book is My Voice, My Choice by Aisleen Hart. So, thank you, Aisling. Thank you to
Thanks so
everyone that
much,
has
Sharon.
listened today. And until next time, take care of you.